What's going on, everybody? It's Patrick with Midtown Outdoors. Come back. We're going to talk about how Gerber beat out Leatherman for the military contracts. And I'm going to put my 2 cents in. What's going on, everybody? It's Patrick with Midtown Outdoors. How's my outdoor crew doing? Hope this video is finding you well. We're going to go back to the 1980s when a certain small company called Leatherman and another company called Gerber went head to head to get military contracts. Military reached out to both companies back in the 80s and said, hey, we want you to make our multi-tools. Now, there's a story behind it, and I found it searching it because I wondered. I was like, how did Gerber beat out Leatherman to make multi-tools? Now, don't get me wrong, Gerber makes a good multi-tool. I think Leatherman makes a little bit better multi-tool, to be honest. But we're going to take a look at them side by side. But the story goes is the military contacted all the multi-tool makers back then and said, hey, we want you to make a multi-tool for us. Now, as it is stated, and I'll leave a link to this little story down below, but the government went to Leatherman and said, hey, here's what we're looking for. Tell us what you'll do. Now, if anybody, and I have done work with the military before, knows that the military is not going to pay XYZ for your whatever, your XYZ. They want you to come in at this little bitty price margin, and well, may not be what you're wanting. But basically what broke down is Leatherman said, no, we're not going to sell our tools that cheap. We feel like they're too good to be sold that cheap. Gerber said, we will. And probably made millions off of it over the years. But I dare say that Leatherman made somewhat of a smart business decision for Leatherman back in the 80s. Like I said, we'll put all the tools together. Now, I don't have a PST, which is what they had out then in 1983. I have a Leatherman Bond, which is similar to the PST. I do have a PST coming, and once it gets here, we'll take a look at it on the channel. But then I also have the MP600, which was the final tool that Gerber made for the military contracts. And I'll show you what I think. Of course, it wasn't made then, but what I would think would make a better tool for the military from Leatherman. Outside of the mud. If anybody knows what the mud is, I don't have one of those because they're expensive. Might get one this year. We'll see. But the mud is made for the AR platform to work on it and stuff. But I feel like that the tool I'll show you would make an awesome tool for the military. So we're going to sit up on the workbench and we'll dig into it a little more. Okay, so this is a representation of the Leatherman PST. This is a Gerber MPT with its leather sheath. So let's look at the offerings that they had on said tools back then, and you will see that they were really similar in what they had. You have pliers, of course, on both. You do have cutting capabilities on both. You'll see that right there. There you see the cutting capabilities. You had a knife on both. You had Phillips head and Phillips head. You have a bottle or a can opener. You had a can opener here too, which also dubs as a bottle opener. Excuse me. You had a file. You had a file on both. This was also considered a big blade screwdriver. Well, you got a big blade screwdriver too, also known as a pry tool on both. Then you had an awl on both. all here. Although theirs didn't have a hole in it like the Leatherman does, but it was basically an awl. Both of them made out of stamped steel construction, so they're not a, you'll see the other kind I was thinking, or Leatherman makes, but they're both stamped steel, so that was cutting back on the cost of making the tools. And I will say that, now I don't know with the PST exactly, I have one coming, but we'll compare them a little bit closer. But I will say the pliers on the Gerber were pretty stout looking pliers. I'll hold them up to the camera and you can see them a little better, but I think they're really, really stout looking pliers. But my biggest problem with both of these is the way they feel in your hand if you're gripping down on them. Now, Leatherman does have a little bit of a curve here, so it's not as ouchy, we'll say. As far as the Gerber goes, well, it's a little, I wouldn't want to have to bear down on that too hard. Hopefully have your gloves on or something back then. But they definitely are not the best comfort in your hands if you're barehanded. But they had all the basic tools you could use or need at the time. So, you know, I see where they were going with it. They were doing the right thing. And of course, Leatherman was too. But they weren't willing to give away their tools. And I applaud them for standing up and not doing that. So let's move on to the next. Okay, so here's the next tool the military went with, Gerber. And this is the MP600. I think it's right. Had nice, the sheath is nice. I give them that. You had MOLLE attachment on the back. Of course, you had webbing on the back, so you could really affix it to anything or any way you wanted to. The tool was a much better representation, I think, of a multi-tool. Pretty tough as nails. Once again, stamped steel construction, so when you got the pliers open, man, you've got some pretty hard steel there to put your hand around. But what they did do is go with the carbide bits that you could replace once you mess them things up. But I think those carbide bits make a big difference in your cutting tool, and I'll show you something else here in a minute. But then you got your can opener again, or yeah, that's the can opener. Over here, I think one of these is a bottle opener, or it could have been all into one. I thought there was a second one. Yeah, right there. So there's your can opener. That's your bottle opener, your bottle opener, your can opener, excuse me. Lanyard. You had a, now you get a serrated knife, a regular knife, a file, little screwdriver, big screwdriver, Phillips head, and you could also use this point as a little screwdriver, little fine screwdriver. Which all these were locking. They're actually, this one's in the lock position, this is in the lock position. So they got a much better tool then, and I'm sure there's probably some other parts of this. This is probably good for crimping in this area here, which would have been awesome, especially if you're an electrical guy in the military. This was made as a one-handed deployment where you could flick it and it would open up. That's what these are here on the sides, is to push in and close the pliers. But anyway, so a much better tool offered years down the road. But what do I think would made military a much better tool today? Well, I'm biased because I like this one so much. But I think this would, excuse me, this, which is the Leatherman P4, would make a much better tool for the military. You do have interchangeable bits again, carbide bits for cutting. You do have crimping tool in the bottom. If I'm not mistaken, you have strippers at the very edge of the cutters too. And then you have all the same utensils, except for you do get scissors. You do get a pocket clip also, which I think would be great. But what I like a little bit better about the Leatherman P4 versus this is all your tools are not in the handle on the inside, they're on the outside. So you don't have to open your tool up to get your utensils out. They're out there on the outside. And you had a saw with the Leatherman. I never ever understood why they didn't give them a saw on the Gerber at all. They gave them a file, but they didn't give them a saw. I don't know. Maybe the military didn't need see the need for a saw, but I would have wanted one. But the cool thing about the Leatherman is it's all one-handed operation and manipulation as far as closing and everything. This is what they were kind of going for, but they weren't just quite there yet, in my opinion. Like I said, this is my opinion on some of this stuff. You know, I'm sure there's other opinions about it, and some people don't like Leatherman, and some people don't like Gerber, and some people prefer a Swiss Army versus, or a Swiss knife versus any of this. But if it was me and I wanted military, or wanted something military, I would choose the Leatherman P4 over the Gerber. Now, I don't know what they have today. I didn't go any further in my research than that, but that is it. That's what I come up with. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. These are some really cool tools. I'm glad to have them in my collection. Both the Gerbers, I really like them. I don't hate on Gerber and their tools. I think they're really cool. I think all of these are fascinating. That's why I own them. But I am partial to Leatherman, always have been. I just think they make an excellent tool. But these were really cool. And like I said, I'm glad to have them in my collection. Hope you get something out of the video. If you did, thumbs up, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. There's still a bunch of you that are not subscribed to the channel, and I would love to have you subscribe. Got a lot coming up. Got a big trip coming up. Not telling anybody about it. I'm just doing it. You'll find out down the road. But that's it for this one. I appreciate you watching. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe, and share button, and we'll see you on the next one. Be prepared.